How to ruin an original car. So some of my videos apply to Classic Mercedes only. Some of them don't. Some of them apply to people who are restoring cars. Some of them apply to people who have bought nice original cars. I find that the rest of the world does not appreciate original Classic Mercedes as much as, you know, I think we do in the United States. Like, originality is a big deal to us here. It's kind of a defining characteristic of our car culture. Although I'd say in France, they really like crusty, unrestored cars as well. In countries like Germany or England, originality is sort of marred by rot and rust. So you see a lot of people having to restore cars. You don't see a lot of cars that are original, well-preserved cars. But here, because of our climate, we see that sort of thing. I notice in Italy and France, there are a lot of these cars that they're just not appreciated. You know, and that's really the sad part. That most of these countries, the people are so either poor or cheap or both. A dry, rust-free 123 is just a car to them. It's like a donkey, you know. That's the way it's been for 45, 50 years. So we're going to talk about how you can, some of the pitfalls and some of the things you got to watch out for when you buy a nice original car. I remember back in 2004, 2005, when I was working with my buddy Terry Laughlin, who was a lot older than me. Terry was a used car dealer, and he used to go to this place called Forest Lake Academy in Apopka and buy cars. And there was a 1982 240D there. It was a one-owner car. It was extremely well kept. And this car was so well kept that I'd say the dash is flawless, the seats are flawless, the carpets are flawless. It's the kind of car today, despite it being an automatic 240D, that you'd probably get $15,000 for after replacing some front end bushings and some other things. The cosmetics were amazing. So Terry sold the car to our buddy George. And George still comes there and details cars. If you're local, some of you have met George. He's a great guy. He's been around Mercedes his whole life. But George did not have a garage. So he kept the car outside at his apartment in Orlando, but nonetheless, he kept the car very clean and very straight, and he drove it to work every day, you know, because back then it was a 20-year-old car. It was like buying a 20-year-old E-Class today. Just a very nice, well-loved, clean, straight car. And one day the ignition switch in the car locked up while George was driving on I-4. I still don't know how this happened, but it was not good. It was not normal. It was like the ignition switch retreated and locked itself, shut the car off, locked the wheel. You know, it was like the car was possessed or something. We'll talk about possessed cars in another video. But I ended up not knowing any better, you know, because this is my first steering lock. I took the whole steering column out, wrestled with it, got it out. Car got a few blemishes in the dash. You know, I didn't know about the locksmithing pin that you could just drill right out and slide everything out, sort of. And George really didn't have a lot of faith in the car after that, so he sold it to my brother Antoine. So this is where things start to go downhill. My brother at the time did not appreciate cars. He's still not much of a car guy. He is a doctor. He's a smart guy. You know, he's really intelligent, but this was clearly the wrong car for him because he started getting the car dirty, started wearing blue jeans when he drove it. I don't really wear blue jeans very much, you know. I just don't, because they're bad for the seats in these cars. He ended up kind of more or less trashing this car, letting the tires wear out. We did do some repairs, but my dad at the time was direct telling us what to fix, and my dad was kind of lackadaisical about repairing the cars. He just assumed they'd always run. Then my brother sold it to my youngest brother, Joe, and Joe did some other things. He ran over a pothole and took out the oil pan. That's how he killed it. Ran it into the back of a school bus because he wasn't paying attention. You know, but each step of the way you start to see things go wrong. Now, I would say the beginning of this whole thing was when the owner donated it to a charity auction. Whenever you donate a car, it's just like pissing in the wind. You're not going to get anything back. So clearly the person who donated the car, their family or whatever, didn't appreciate it. Then George got it probably because Terry, my boss, didn't price it high enough. George probably should have kept the car and taken better care of it. And then he took it to a bad mechanic to fix the steering lock, which at the time was me because I was young and inexperienced. And then after that, he sold it to the wrong owner, which is a person with no garage, no responsibility, was young and reckless with cars, and that was my brother. And then that owner sold it to a person who was even more irresponsible and more reckless. Where does this end? The car was scrapped. My mom sold it to a guy who basically parted it out because it sat in our driveway for years. It was just done. You know, I didn't want to put an engine into it because it had been run into so many times. The body gaps are no longer straight. It had rust because it hadn't been garaged in years and years. And this is sort of a creeping slow death because I think the death of this car took place over a period of just 6 years. That is all it takes. The lesson I learned from this was my first two really great Mercedes, my 300D that I drive every day and my 280 SE 4.5 were free cars with major problems that had to be fixed because they had been taken into the ground by their owners. You know, I'm not saying they're the nicest cars. The 300D still looks like a free car. But, you know, at least I didn't run into a school bus. The whole problem with this sort of thing, though, is you get people that don't appreciate the cars, that purchase them too cheap, that don't have the right maintenance skill set, or they don't know people to maintain it, or the cars just go downhill, or they buy a car they can't afford to maintain. And what I will caution you about is this: when you sell a classic Mercedes, sell it to somebody who's smart enough, experienced enough, and appreciative of the car enough to garage it and maintain it like they're supposed to. Don't sell it to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. There's so many people like that. You know, they just want the car, and then 6 months later the realization comes in. Then they sell it to anybody. It's all about who buys the car. I keep saying this over and over again. It's about whoever buys the car. Sometimes the person who buys the car is a great person. 75% of the time, they just don't deserve the car. Anyway, if you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Remember, if you have a classic Mercedes that you're going to sell, don't sell it to just